I've told this story maybe 4 times in my whole life. Once to my wife, once to a kid who wanted to join up and thought it was all glory, and twice to men who were there with me just to make sure I hadn't dreamed it. I still don't think people believe me. That's fine. I didn't believe it either, and I was lying right next to her when it happened. Let me start at the beginning, because if I just tell you the shot, you'll miss the part that matters. The shot wasn't the impossible thing. The impossible thing was the woman who took it. Her name was Dana Whitlock, not a famous name. You won't find it on a wall anywhere. Some of the best ones never make it to a wall, and she'd have hated being on one anyway. She was a sniper, and before you picture some 6-foot statue of a person, let me stop you. She was maybe 5'5", quiet, wore her hair pulled back so tight it looked like it hurt. She drank her coffee black and cold because, she said, hot coffee made your hands warm and warm hands shake more than cold ones. I thought that was nonsense the first time I heard it. I don't anymore. She didn't talk much. When she did, it was usually a question, never a brag. Most of the loud guys figured that meant she was soft. Most of the loud guys were wrong about a lot of things. I was her spotter. My job was the math, the wind, the distance, the calls. Her job was to be the calmest human being on the planet for as long as it took. We'd worked together for about 8 months before the day I'm telling you about. Long enough to trust her, not long enough to know what she really was. It was September, high up in the mountains, the kind of place where the air's so thin your head pounds for the first 3 days and then your body just gives up complaining. Cold at night. Hot at midday, dust in everything, your teeth, your eyes, the corners of every weapon no matter how many times you cleaned it. We were attached to a team running an operation I won't fully describe. Doesn't matter for the story. What matters is the man in charge. Commander Reese Hollander, Navy SEAL, 20-some years in. The kind of guy who'd seen so much that nothing surprised him anymore, and he wore that on his face like a permanent weather pattern. Big, gray at the temples, voice like gravel rolling downhill. When he talked, men got quiet, not out of fear, out of habit. He'd earned that quiet 100 times over. Hollander did not love having snipers attached that weren't his own. He didn't say it out loud, but you could feel it. He looked at Dana the first morning, looked at me, looked at the long rifle case, and gave this little nod that didn't mean welcome. It meant we'll see. She didn't flinch. She just said, "Morning, Commander," and went to check her gear. I remember one of his guys, a sergeant named Mick, grinning at another guy and muttering something I won't repeat. Something about her. Something stupid. Dana heard it. I know she heard it because I heard it and she was closer. She didn't turn around. She didn't say a word. She just kept wiping down her scope, slow and careful, like the comment had landed somewhere on the floor and wasn't worth picking up. That was Dana. She let the noise fall. The first 2 days were nothing. Waiting. That's most of the job, if I'm honest. You lie still for hours. Your legs go numb. A fly walks across your face and you let it, because moving is a luxury you can't afford. People think this work is action. It's mostly patience dressed up in dust. On the 3rd day, everything changed. There was a structure down in the valley. A compound, low and ugly, made of mud, brick, and stubbornness. Intelligence said the man we wanted was inside. Hollander's team was going to move on it that night. Quiet, clean, in and out before anyone knew. But that afternoon, something went wrong with the plan, the way something always does. A boy came up the mountain. He couldn't have been more than 10. Dirty, skinny, herding 2 goats that didn't want to be herded. He came up a goat path none of us knew about, and he came up it fast, and he stopped about 40 feet from one of Hollander's hidden positions, and he stared. Kids see things. That's the thing nobody tells you. A grown man will walk past a hide site and never notice. A kid will look right at it, because kids haven't learned yet what they're not supposed to see. This kid saw. I watched it happen through my optic. I watched his little face change. The way it goes still when you realize you're somewhere you shouldn't be. And then he turned and ran back down the mountain, leaving his goats behind, and we all knew exactly where he was running. To the compound to tell them. Hollander's voice came over the radio, low and flat. "Hold. Nobody fires on the kid. Nobody touches the kid. I want you to remember that, because a lot of men in that spot would have made a different call. Hollander didn't. Whatever else he was, he didn't." But now the clock was broken. The whole night operation was dead. By dark, that compound would be a fortress. They'd know we were close. They'd have time to dig in, to set traps, to move the man we wanted out the back through tunnels we couldn't see. We had maybe 20 minutes before the kid reached the bottom. That's when the second problem walked out the front door. A man stepped out of the compound, then another, then a third, and this one was dragging someone. I adjusted my optic, and my stomach dropped into my boots. It was a hostage, a man in civilian clothes, hands bound behind his back, a bag over his head. Later we'd learn he was an interpreter who'd gone missing 3 weeks earlier, a guy with a wife and 2 daughters back home, a guy who'd done nothing but help and gotten taken for it. They'd figured something was coming. Maybe the kid was already screaming up at them from halfway down. Maybe they just felt it the way animals feel a storm. Either way, they'd made a decision. They were going to use the hostage as a shield, or worse, they were going to make an example of him before they ran. They forced him to his knees in the open dirt, in front of the compound. One of them stood behind him with a rifle. And here's the part that made it impossible. The distance. I started running the numbers in my head before Hollander even called it. The hostage was a long way out, down in the valley, across thin mountain air that does strange things to a bullet. There was a crosswind moving through that valley like a river, shifting, gusting, dying, coming back. And the shooter, the man with the rifle behind the hostage's head, he was standing maybe 18 inches behind that man. 18 inches. A miss to the left, a miss to the right, a gust no one read correctly, and you don't hit the bad guy. You hit the man on his knees with a bag over his head. Hollander came up beside us. He'd low-crawled over, fast for a man his size. He looked through his own glass for a long moment. I heard him breathing. Then he said it, the line I'll never forget. "No one can make that shot." He didn't say it to be cruel. He said it like a fact, like saying the sun's going to set. He'd been doing this longer than anyone there, and his whole body of experience was telling him the truth as he knew it. At that range, in that wind, with 18 inches between life and the worst mistake of your life, no one makes that shot. Not him, not his best shooter, not anyone. "We wait," he said. "We try to talk a drone overhead, There's no time," Dana said. She said it quietly. She always said everything quietly, but it cut right through him. Hollander turned and looked at her, really looked, like he was seeing her for the first time. "Excuse me." "There's no time, Commander." She wasn't looking at him. She was already settling in behind her rifle, cheek to the stock, the way I'd seen her do 1,000 times. "By the time anything's overhead, that man's gone. You know it. I know it." I'll be honest. The whole hide went silent. Mick was there. A couple of the others had crawled up, and every one of them was looking at this small, quiet woman lying in the dirt, lining up a shot that the most experienced man any of us had ever served under had just declared impossible. Hollander's jaw worked. I could see him fighting it, because if she missed, if she so much as breathed wrong, she'd be the one who killed the hostage, not the enemy, her, and it'd be on his head for letting her try. "Whitlock," he said, and his voice had dropped to almost nothing. "If you're wrong." "I know what wrong looks like, sir," she said. "I've seen it. I'm not going to give it to you today." And then she went still. I mean still in a way I can't really explain to you if you've never seen it. Her breathing slowed. Her shoulders dropped. The tension went out of her hands. It was like watching a storm decide all at once to become a calm lake. "Talk to me," she said, "to me, just to me." Everyone else in that valley stopped existing for her. And I started to read her the wind, People think a sniper just looks through a scope and pulls a trigger. They think it's eyesight. It isn't. It's conversation. It's two people becoming one nervous system for about 90 seconds. I talk, she listens, she trusts, and somewhere in the middle of all that talking, a bullet does something a bullet shouldn't be able to do. So I talked. Wind's coming left to right, I said. It's pushing through that draw, picking up speed where it funnels. I'm reading 8 to 10, gusting 12. 8 to 10, gusting 12, she repeated, barely a whisper. Her lips moved more than her voice did. I want you to understand what those numbers meant. At that distance, a wind like that could shove a bullet a foot off course. More. And she wasn't aiming at a chest the size of a dinner plate. She was aiming at the 18 inches of space behind a kneeling man's head, where the enemy shooter stood. The margin she had was about the width of two of your hands held side by side. Across a distance most people couldn't even see clearly without the glass. He's moving, I said. The shooter behind the hostage shifted his weight, stepped slightly, lifted his own rifle, leveled it down at the back of the kneeling man's skull. He was getting ready. We were out of time and we all knew it. Down in the valley, the hostage, the interpreter, the man with the two daughters, was shaking. I could see it through the glass, little tremors running through his shoulders. The bag was still over his head, so he couldn't see anything, but he knew. You always know. Your body knows before your mind lets you say it. Dana, I said, windows closing. I see him, calm, Lake calm, give me the call. And here's the thing about that moment that I've never been able to explain to anyone who wasn't there. I was scared. Hollander was scared. I could hear it in how quiet he'd gotten. Mick, the loudmouth, had his fist pressed against his own mouth. Every single one of us was carrying the weight of what would happen if this went wrong. Except her. She had let all of it go. The fear, the pressure, the stakes, the men watching, the commander who'd said it couldn't be done. None of it existed in her world anymore. There was only the wind, the rifle, the distance, and my voice in her ear. She had made herself empty of everything except the shot. That's the part nobody tells you about people who do impossible things. They don't do them by feeling more. They do them by feeling nothing at all, for just long enough. Hold for the gust, I said. A gust was building in the draw. I could see it in the dust, the way the dirt lifted and curled. If she fired into that, the bullet would walk right off the target and into the hostage. We had to wait for it to pass. We had to wait, even though every second of waiting was a second closer to that man dying anyway. So we waited. I counted it in my head. The gust rolled through, kicking grit up off the valley floor, and I watched the scrub brush bend and the dust spiral and then slowly settle. Wind's dropping, I said. 8, 7 coming down, steady at 6. 6, she breathed. Hold 6. It's gonna hold for you, trust it. The shooter's finger was on his trigger. I could see it. He was a heartbeat away, maybe 2. The hostage had gone very still now, the way people go still when they've stopped hopping. The shaking had stopped. That was worse somehow. The stillness was worse. And in my earpiece, I heard Dana exhale, long and slow, the way you let out a breath you've been holding your whole life. She didn't tell me she was taking it. Good shooters never do. The shot just comes, somewhere in the bottom of a breath, in that little pocket of perfect stillness between letting the air out and needing the next one. The pause. She lived in that pause. I heard the rifle go off. You don't really hear a shot like that the way you'd think. Not when you're that locked in. It's almost gentle. A crack and a thump and a kick against the shoulder, and then the longest wait of your entire life while the bullet travels. Because here's the cruelty of distance. The bullet leaves the rifle and then there's time. Real time. A full second more, where the thing is already done and nobody can take it back. But nobody knows yet whether it's a miracle or the worst tragedy of their lives. You just lie there, frozen, watching, waiting for the world to tell you which kind of man you're going to be for the rest of your life. I watched through the glass. I watched the hostage kneeling. I watched the shooter behind him. And then I watched the shooter drop. Just drop, straight down, like a puppet with the strings cut. He went down and he didn't move, and the rifle fell out of his hands into the dirt, and the kneeling man was still kneeling. Still alive, the bag still over his head, not understanding yet that the thing standing behind him a half second ago was now lying in the dust. For one whole second, nobody in our hide made a sound. Then Mick, the loudmouth, the one who'd muttered something stupid on the first day, let out a breath that was almost a sob and whispered, "Oh my God." And Dana, she didn't celebrate, she didn't even smile. She worked the bolt, smooth and automatic, chambered the next round, and put her eye right back to the scope, scanning, because the other two men were still down there and the job wasn't finished, and she was already 3 seconds into the next problem while the rest of us were still catching up to the last one. That's who she was. But I have to back up because I skipped the most important part, the part I think about most. When the wind dropped to 6 and held, I told her to trust it, and she did. But there was a half second right before she fired where the math didn't fully add up, where any sane shooter would have hesitated. The angle of the shooter's head, the slope of the valley, the tiny lean the man had just taken, it all meant that a perfect by-the-book shot, the shot they teach you, would have threaded too close to the hostage. Too close. The kind of close where a perfect shot still kills the wrong man. Dana saw that. In a fraction of a second, she saw it, and she made an adjustment that no manual would ever tell you to make. She didn't aim where she was trained to aim. She read something in that half second that I couldn't see, that Hollander with all his years couldn't see, and she trusted it, and she was right. When I asked her about it afterward, days afterward, when we could finally talk about it, she just shrugged and said, "He leaned, so I leaned with him." That's all she said. He leaned, so I leaned with him. Like it was nothing. Like it wasn't the single most precise act of human concentration I'd ever witnessed in my life. Down in the valley, things moved fast after that. The two remaining men, the ones who dragged the hostage out, froze when their guy dropped. They didn't even hear the shot at first. Sound takes its time over distance too. They just saw their man fall with no warning, no reason, like the hand of God had reached down and flicked him over. And for men like that, who live by fear and use it on everyone weaker than them, there is nothing more terrifying than an enemy you cannot see, cannot hear, and cannot predict. They ran. They left the hostage right there in the dirt and they bolted back toward the compound, and that broke whatever spell had been holding everything still. Hollander's voice exploded over the radio sharp and fast, and his team moved. They poured down off the slopes they'd been hiding on, fast and silent and absolutely furious in that controlled way the best ones have. The night operation was dead, but this they could do right now in daylight, while the enemy was panicking. I stayed on the glass and kept calling what I saw. Dana stayed beside me, covering the angles, ready, her breathing already back to normal like she'd just woken from a nap instead of doing the impossible. And the hostage, the interpreter, the father of 2 girls, knelt there alone in the dirt for a few more seconds, not knowing he was saved, still waiting for a bullet that was never coming now. I'll never forget the moment someone reached him. One of Hollander's men got to him first and pulled the bag off his head, and the man blinked in the sudden light and he looked around, and he saw the body of the one who'd been standing over him lying a few feet away, and you could watch the understanding hit him in stages. Confusion, then disbelief, then this terrible breaking flood of relief that bent him right over, forehead almost to the ground, his bound shoulders heaving. He didn't know who'd saved him. He didn't know where the shot had come from. He'd never meet her. He'd never even know her name was Dana Whitlock. But he got to go home to his daughters. And somewhere up on a dusty ridge, the woman who gave that to him was already quietly cleaning her scope, the way she did at the end of every day, like nothing in the world had happened at all. We held that ridge until it was over. It didn't take long. Once Hollander's team moved, the fight went out of the compound fast. The man we'd come for tried to slip out the back, through the tunnels we'd worried about, and ran straight into an element that was waiting because Hollander, even rattled, even with his whole plan in pieces, was still one of the best there ever was at this. He'd repositioned men the second the shot dropped. He'd read it. That's the part of him I'll always respect. By late afternoon, the dust had settled in every sense. The hostage was secured, checked over, wrapped in a blanket even though it wasn't cold, because that's what you do for a man who's just come back from the edge of the worst thing. The compound was cleared. The man we wanted was in custody alive, which mattered for reasons above my pay grade. And Dana was sitting on a rock with her rifle across her knees, drinking that cold black coffee out of a dented metal cup, watching the valley go gold as the sun dropped. I sat down next to her. I didn't say anything for a while. Some things you don't put words on right away. You just sit near them. Finally, I said, "You know that was impossible, right?" She looked at the valley. She had this little tired half smile. "Nothing's impossible," she said. "Things are just hard until somebody does them. Then they're not impossible anymore. They're just hard." I've thought about that sentence for years. Here's the part of the story I most want you to hear, though, because it isn't really about the shot. It's about what happened after with Hollander. That evening, when the team came back up off the valley floor, sweaty and spent and quiet the way men get after the adrenaline drains out, Commander Reese Hollander walked straight across the camp to where Dana was sitting. The whole place went quiet again. Everyone felt it coming. This big, gray granite of a man, 20-some years in, the guy who'd looked at her on day one and given that little nod that meant we'll see, he walked right up to her and stood there. Dana started to get up. You stand for a commander, it's habit. He put a hand on her shoulder and pressed her gently back down. "Sit," he said. And then he did something I have never seen a man like him do before or since. He took off his own glove and he held out his bare hand to her and he said, "I've been doing this 23 years. I have never in my whole life seen a shot like that. Not in training, not in war, not anywhere." His voice caught just slightly on the last word. "I told you no one could make it. I was wrong. I was completely wrong. And there's a man going home to his kids tonight because you didn't listen to me." Dana shook his hand. She didn't say anything clever. She didn't say "I told you so," though God knows she'd earned it. She just shook his hand and said, "We got him home, sir. That's the whole job." "That's the whole job." That's all she said. Hollander held onto her hand a second longer. Then he nodded, and this time the nod meant something completely different from day one. This time it meant respect. The real kind. The kind that costs a man like him something to give. He started to walk away. Then he stopped and turned back and said, loud enough for the whole camp to hear, because he wanted them to hear it, "Anybody got anything to say about whether Whitlock belongs on this team? You say it to me." He looked right at Mick when he said it. Mick stood up, the loudmouth, the guy who'd muttered something stupid on day one that he thought no one heard. And in front of everyone, he walked over to Dana and stuck out his hand and said, "Ma'am, I was wrong about you. Dead wrong. It won't happen again." She shook his hand too. No grudge, no lecture. She'd let the noise fall on day one, and she let this fall just the same, and somehow that made it land even harder on him. You could see it in his face. He'd carry that one a long time. I want to tell you what made her different, because I've served with a lot of people who could shoot. Shooting is a skill. You can teach it. You can practice it. Plenty of people have steadier hands than Dana did. What you can't teach is the thing she had in the second before she fired. That emptiness. That ability to take the most terrifying moment a human being can face and become completely, perfectly calm inside it. To let go of fear, ego, pressure, every loud voice telling you it can't be done, and to be alone with nothing but the truth of the wind and the distance and the trust. She wasn't fearless. I asked her once. She told me she was scared every single time. "Fear's not the problem," she said. "Fear's just information. The problem is when you start listening to it instead of the wind." The problem is when you listen to fear instead of the wind. I've tried to live by that honestly, not just in war, in everything. Every time something feels impossible, every time some loud, certain voice, sometimes my own, tells me it can't be done, I think about a small, quiet woman on a dusty ridge who let go of all of it and trusted the only thing that was actually true. He leaned, so I leaned with him. Nothing's impossible. It's just hard until somebody does it. I'd like to tell you Dana got a parade, a medal pinned on in front of cameras, her name on a wall somewhere so kids could read it. It didn't really happen like that. The work she did mostly stayed in the dark, the way that work does. There was a quiet recognition, the kind that happens behind closed doors that most people will never hear about. The interpreter went home. He held his daughters. He never knew her name and she never wanted him to. It's better that way, she told me once. He doesn't need to think about us. He needs to think about them. That's the point of the whole thing. That's the point of the whole thing. We worked together another 1.5 years after that. Then careers go the way careers go, and people get posted to different places, and you promise to stay in touch and you mostly don't, the way it always is. The last time I saw her, she gave me that same tired half smile and said, "Stay calm out there." Not stay safe. Stay calm. I think that was the most Dana thing she ever said. I heard a few years later that she finally hung it up. Went somewhere quiet. Coaches now, I think. Teaches young shooters. And I think about those kids, whoever they are, getting to learn from her, getting that calm passed down to them like a flame from one candle to the next, and most of them having no idea that the small, quiet woman teaching them how to breathe once made a shot that a SEAL commander with 23 years swore up and down that no human being on earth could make. She made it because she didn't believe him. She made it because she'd learned, somewhere along the way, not to confuse hard with impossible. So that's the story, the one I've only told a handful of times, the one nobody quite believes. I was lying right next to her. I read her the wind. I heard her breathe out. I watched a man who was a half second from death stand up and walk away and go home to 2 little girls who will grow up never knowing how close they came to growing up without him. And I watched the most experienced man I ever served take off his glove and shake the hand of the person who proved him wrong, and thank her for not listening to him. People ask me sometimes when I let this story slip. They ask, what was the secret? How did she do it? And I always tell them the same thing she told me on that rock, with the valley going gold and the coffee gone cold in her hands. Nothing's impossible. Things are just hard until somebody decides to do them. She decided. And a man went home.